Good evening, and welcome everybody to our authors event here at Phoenixville Library for Slants of Light, stories and poems from the Women's Writing Circle, and we're very excited that you're here. This evening we are going to read from our stories, but also tell you a little bit about our story behind the story. So my name is Ginger Murphy to start, and I got elected to be the host as I'm sort of the hometown gal here in Phoenixville. So it's my pleasure to welcome you, and I will be introducing all of these lovely ladies who all have featured work in the book. A couple of housekeeping things before we do get started. I know I always forget this. If anybody has cell phones in purses or pockets, if you kindly silence those. And if during the program you should need to use the bathroom, if you go back out the door where you entered and take a left, you'll find a restroom on your left. And I think that's it for the housekeeping. And just to open up, the Women's Writing Circle is a place where we come, and one of the things that we do when we start, you'll notice a candle in front of Jan there in the middle of the table. That's our way. We light the candle to open the circle, to shut out the distractions of the outside world. Because this then becomes our own space where we share and write and read and respond to each other. So we're not going to light that, but we bring it as a symbolic piece. The other thing that we do is that as we are, each person, when we gather in what we call our read-around, gets about 10 minutes. And when you are talking, we pass to that person the talking stone. And that symbolizes that you are the one who has the space and everybody's attention. So you'll see us doing that. We actually do that. And this is all our way of creating a space. And then since it's my job as the host to kind of try to keep tabs on time, which we also need to do in the circle, there is a chime that we use. And that's our very delicate way of saying, time's up, moving on. So we'll use both of those tonight to recreate a little bit of what it's like to be in our space in the Women's Writing Circle. So what the evening will look like, as you can see, we have a whole host of lovely ladies here who are authors from the book, and I will introduce each person. And kind of either side of that, Susan Widener, who we will start with, started the Women's Writing Circle, and she's going to kind of bookend our presentation on the front end by telling a little bit about how she started this circle, the story behind that. And then on the back end, since Random House, and I don't know why, did not commission us for this book. I can't imagine. We, in fact, self-published. And that's a really exciting story in itself. So Susan will wrap up the program by talking a little bit about that. And in between, each of these lovely ladies will either read from or just tell a little bit of being a part of the Women's Writing Circle, and what that's like, and what it's meant for her writing, and maybe even a little bit about the story or poem that she has in the book. So I'm going to begin by passing the talking stone to Susan Wagner, who's from Chester Springs, and our founder of the Women's Writing Circle. Susan has self-published her own memoir, Again in a Heartbeat, with a sequel called Morning at Wellington Square. And we're excited because Susan is the reason that we're all here. So I'm going to turn this over to her to tell you the backstory.
Thanks, Ginger. Actually, they're all the reason I'm here tonight. Well, welcome. I'm so excited to be able to talk about the Women's Writing Circle. My goodness, I can't believe it'll be 4 years in November 2009 that I first walked into a bookshop that looked like something out of Dickens' London called Wellington Square over there in the Eagle View Corporate Center, and had this wild notion that wouldn't it be great if I started a group of people who could sit down, read each other's work, give feedback, and sort of support and validate our stories. At the time, I was working on my first memoir, Again in a Heartbeat, which was about meeting and falling in love with my husband, and then his 7-year battle with cancer, and my journey as a young widow after his death. And I had begun writing this story at a writing retreat in Kentucky and found that the validation of other writers reading my story, having the instant feedback and some of the great support that my story actually was resonated was the reason that I decided when I came here, I was in Arizona for a while, came back to Chester County, that I would like to start a writing group. And so what happened was at our first meeting, we had 2 women show up. I put some notices on flyers and up on library bulletin boards, and I walked in, and we actually had 2 women, and then a 3rd woman walked in. And that was the beginning in November of 2009 of a group which since then has grown and welcomed over 200 women from Chester and Montgomery counties who have come into the writing circle to read their work, their poetry, their fiction, their creative nonfiction, and their memoir. So I don't want you to think we're totally a memoir group, because we're not. Although I have to say that part of the circle, the read-around, is finding our voices as writers, and this happens a lot through the self-discovery that is memoir writing. I'd also like to say that we offer workshops which are open to men, and we're having one coming up on October 19th. We still have a couple slots left over. It's a memoir writing workshop, and it is open to men. So we've really kind of gotten into a whole thing here of camaraderie, support, validation, and writing. So thank you. And my time is up.
Thank you so much, Susan. It's a great.
I'm not going to stand up. Is that going to mess you up, cameraman?
Yeah. Our next reader is Diane Yannick. She's from Westchester. And Diane Yannick.
Oh, Yannick.
Yannick from Westchester.
Diane
Yannick, our very own. She hails from Westchester, and she was a language arts teacher for 33 years, I think, and she's been known now to turn up in classrooms to tell a story. So with that, Diane, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. I'm going to start by reading just a little excerpt from the story that is in the anthology, and it's called Last to Know. And at this point, I had been told rather abruptly by my friends that my husband had hooked up with one of my best girlfriends. And I was waiting for him to come home so that I could confront him. As he opened the door, I heard him humming the theme song to Star Wars, his favorite movie. "Oh, you waited up for me. I'm really hungry. Is there anything left?" I watched in disbelief as he cut himself a piece of my lopsided birthday cake. "Do not eat that cake," I said with calculated calmness. "Why? I'm hungry, for heaven's sake." "Where have you been tonight?" I asked, amazed at how calm I sounded. "What's this, the Grand Inquisition? I told you that I was gone to Sean's duck blind in..." "Where were you, really?" I cut him off in a monotone. "Hey, look, I've had a long day. Can't we talk about this tomorrow?" He was becoming agitated. I studied him carefully. It was then that I knew for sure that my prayers would go unanswered. "You cheating, no good, sorry excuse for a husband. You and Sandra, my friends have seen you with her, you sneaking..." My voice broke. Kirk stammered, looking around the room. Any place but me, his wife of 7 years. I waited for his denial. Only silence. "What do you want me to say?" he asked quietly. "I want you to tell the truth," I said just as quietly. "Well, the truth is I have been seeing Sandra." His eyes averted mine, and I watched as his mouth hardened and his expression changed from surprise to defiance. "Do you love her?" I held my breath. So that story goes on, and so do I. I wrote it to sort of demystify a time in my life that I had a really hard time getting beyond. how could he choose her instead of me, the mother of his young daughter and his wife of 7 years? I was also really humiliated because I didn't pick up on any of the clues that were out there waiting to be caught. And you've got to remember, this was before reality TV and twerking and all that. It was way easier to be embarrassed than it is now. However, that experience made me tougher as a person and as a writer. And I can do sad, but I can also do funny. And right now I'm only interested in writing autobiographical vignettes, but I've done some. I have a new husband for 30 years, and I've done some pieces about his snoring and my rather unconventional solutions to that, and about charm school and ending up in the ER the first time I shaved my legs. So I try to do both sides, and I try to mix that up. Writing for me isn't really a choice. It's something that I need to do. It's joyous, it's torturous. I have a big loose leaf folder with all these stories, and sometimes if I'm sitting there watching like Project Runway, I can hear them saying, "Come, edit me, turn that off, make it work." But I do. I'm going back and I'm editing, and through the process of being in the Women's Writing Circle, I'm learning how to develop my voice. And I did teach children to write, and now it's my time to teach myself. This anthology was my first journey into publishing anything, and thank you so much for sharing your time with us tonight.
Thank you, Diane. That was really lovely. Next we have Candace Swick, and Candace is from Downingtown. She's a Westchester University graduate with a degree in American literature, and she is also a published poet. Please.
Hi, I just wanted to say thanks for coming out tonight. It means a lot to myself and all of my fellow writers. I'm going to start out by just talking a little bit about the fact that my life in the last 2 or 3 years it's been very crazy. And so the Women's Writing Circle has kind of helped lift me out of a very big transformation. 3 years ago, I left my husband of 15 years, and then 1.5 years ago, I had open heart surgery. So it's kind of been like a rebirth for me, and all of these ladies have been a huge part of that. So every other, I guess it's the second Saturday of every month, we all meet, and we sometimes have a writing prompt, and so we just share a little piece of what's going on in our world with each other. And this is my first published work as far as short stories go. I have had some poems published before, but I have 2 short stories in our anthology, and they're loosely based on my life, and specifically my marriage and my divorce. And I did want to say that when we all started out, when I started out with the Women's Writing Circle, it was about 1.5 years ago, and I considered the ladies my writing peeps. But within the last 2 years on our, and you know, working on our stories, they've become my friends. So we help each other out. Anyway, so I'm going to read a little bit from both of my stories. So, this is an excerpt from my story Shriver's Bench, and it depicts a pleasant time in my main character Trish, i.e. me, in my marriage. So let me start on that. The summer of 1995, wearing cut-off jean shorts, Birkenstocks, and a clear crystal necklace, Trish held on to Tim like she'd never let go. The Ferris wheel stopped to let the next couple on, and Tim stared at her with hungry desire. stop it. Stop staring at me. I hate when you do that. I can't help it. I could stare at your blue eyes and cherry red lips all day, and you know you love it. And she did. Trish loved the way he would stop whatever he was doing when she least expected it and stare at her. She was his Miss America, his beauty queen. The intensity of his deep brown eyes both thrilled and scared her. Tim was her first real love, and she fell hard and fast. His smooth, muscled chest and broad shoulders were sexy and protective. Tim worked construction. He was rugged, and as her mom would say, rough around the edges. His seductive animal maleness made her feel small and in need of protection. She couldn't explain it, but she liked the intoxication she felt. After the Ferris wheel ride, Tim forced her to go on the haunted house ride. It wasn't her thing, but fair was fair. Trish remembered leaning against the wooden wall of the boardwalk haunted house. Her skin was hot and tingly, and it wasn't sunburn hot, but young love hot. Tim was leaning in, stopped briefly to brush back a piece of her blonde hair. His calloused fingers touched her cheek, sending chills through her body. It was taking him forever, and she could smell the mixture of his suntan lotion and Drakkar cologne. He was driving her crazy. She was electric for him, and when his lips finally sank into hers, she let herself go with him completely. That was the night she fell in love with Tim. Wherever he was going, she was going too. In 1995, Trish was still in college and caught up in her studies. There wasn't time to overanalyze her new boyfriend. All she had room for was the fun, the ignited romantic side of Tim. Him nibbling on her ear while they watched a movie, Tim giving her an impromptu shoulder massage. The euphoric magnetism between them blindfolded her and covered up anything bad. He made her feel fresh and alive, and she was his, all his. It didn't matter that he had a 2-year-old son from a previous relationship, or that he was bankrupt. Tim's attentiveness seemed to cancel out any negatives about his personality. Her mind liked that young love movie. Trish replayed the memories of their romance with nostalgia and longing. Whenever Trish allowed her heart to steer, she felt like a teenager listening to her favorite song over and over again. Sadly, she no longer felt much comfort from the memories. Like the old music tapes, she was exhausted. Okay.
I feel like you're not meaning.
Not a problem. Well, if you want to hear a little bit from my other story, you need to keep on. So to be continued.
Thank you. Thank you, Candice. As you can hear, there are a lot of different voices and topics, and our inspiration comes from a lot of different sources. And as Candice said, I think we've become not only writers working together, but friends working together, and I echo what you say about treasuring that. Next in our lineup is Vicki McCaffrey. She is from Malvern, and she works with children's programs at the Chester County Historical Society, and she is going to be reading from A Portrait of 4 Friendships.
Thank you. Welcome everyone again. I think the Women's Writing Circle is a really nice, safe place for you to experience and to kind of create something on your own that you can get some feedback from, but also in kind of a safe situation. So I was a reading specialist for 25 years teaching in the school, and I read a lot of books during that time, a lot of stories, and analyzed them and thought about them, and then I decided that it would really be fun to try to create and write one of my own stories. So I can tell you that it is fun and it is marvelous, but it's hard work, and it's nice to have a group like this to help you through it. So I wrote a story of 4 friends because I think sometimes those friendships that you have can really nurture you and carry you through some really tough times in your life. And when I look back on it, I realized that there were 3 of us who had started teaching together, and we're still friends 40 years later now. So I sort of wrote a tribute to that. And of course, friendships evolve, and we're still evolving now. So who knows what will happen to these 4 friends, because, you know, life goes on and you don't know what's going to happen. So I'm just going to read a couple of excerpts. As I organized photographs from my digital camera onto folders in my laptop, I pause at the picture of the four of us smiling, with our glasses raised and a birthday toast. "The girls," I murmur softly. The camera caught one tall, honey-haired woman with glasses and a wide, easy grin. An athletic-looking brunette, deeply tanned with a steady gaze. A blonde with an impish smile, and me, with a cap of cropped brown hair and a bright smile. These women are not my relatives, but we've gone through our whole adult lives together. We're not young anymore either. We've got wrinkles and gray hair. We're heavier than we once were. Yet, as I look into these familiar faces I've raised for the camera, I can see clearly the girls that we were. So then we go on to blah, 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 about the girls that we were. Now, this is more the modern day piece of it. Beckett, one of the girls, says she wants to stay in her farmhouse forever. Dree is certain she will move to a retirement center. Celia is not ready to think about selling her house yet. I am uncertain as to what I will do, so I worry about it. I wonder out loud, when is the right age to sell your house? If you move to a retirement center, do you stay around your friends or move to be closer to your children? What do you do when your children don't live anywhere near each other? Do you choose between them? That was 2 weeks ago. Lately, as I ponder life and change, I wonder what the future holds for us. I know how lucky I am to enjoy them. These women know things about me that my parents and my siblings do not. They have experienced things with me that neither my children nor my husband has. So I take a moment to really look at that photograph taken on my 65th birthday. 4 people, each one an individual in her own right. Each one shaped my life for the better. 40 years of friendship, 4 mature women, but to me, will always be the girls.
Thank you, Tiffany. Nice tribute to friendships. And next, we have Jan Backus, who comes to us from Fort Washington. You'll notice we have a pretty big geographic distribution. But we all do show up on Saturday mornings, which I think is really pretty cool. So Jan is also a published poet, and she has, her hobbies include photography and an avid fascination with covered fridges. And Jan is going to share a little bit about what it's like being in the women's writing group.
Thank you, Ginger, and everyone that's here. It's so great to see a room full of people. We thought there would be about 5. I was looking for a writing group, and I attended a couple until I came across Susan's group, and I was smitten, I guess you'd say. When I first went to the group, I had a poem, and I didn't know that I had a story in me. So when we decided we were going to do the anthology, I decided that writing a story would be healing for me. So I write poetry still because I get things out of my heart and my soul. And it just is a very healing thing. And every time I go to the read around, I feel as though I have gotten something from the women out of myself, and I feel very good about myself when I'm there and when I leave there. My story has to do with several painful experiences. I had a failed suicide attempt when I was 20 years old. I took too many pills on purpose. I am still trying to deal with my lesbianism. It's difficult for me because I'm not really out in the world. I mean, people know that I'm gay, but I don't really feel free. I'm also an alcoholic. I wrote about that, and I wrote about my relationship with God, which ties it all together. It's called The Heavenly Baseball Diamond, and I wrote it about a spiritual awakening that I had at a rehab that I was in, up the street actually, called Eagleville Hospital. The year was 1977, and few people knew about my struggle or the struggle of people like me. While the economy prospered and the country had experienced the free love and peace movement, even the women's movement, society had silenced those of us who were gay. With the exception of now outdated drugs, Thorazine and Tofranil, prescribed by my psychiatrist, I dealt with my confusion and what had now become self-loathing by drinking. 3 years following my attempt at suicide, I was nearly always in search of a drink. God, society, and other people had silenced me, but I felt God had listened. I attended my first AA meeting, and I didn't really know that I was an alcoholic. I was very young. And when I found out, I hadn't believed in God until I first went to that meeting, and then I was introduced to God as a higher power, and I feel as though I was saved.
Thank you, Jan. You can see very, very powerful stories that we share in the Women's Writing Circle, and a lot of different experiences. And I just feel very grateful as a participant in the circle that the amount of trust that we have. You can imagine, some of the topics that people have shared about. We really hold that safe in the circle, so that's something very special about it. Our next reader is Patty Klein-Capaldo, who herself runs a writing group over in Collegeville. I think it meets weekly. And she is now working on her first novel, and she is going to read from Legacy of a Childless Woman.
Thank you, Ginger. And thanks everyone for coming out. I guess I've always been a writer. Sometimes that's been a dormant aspect of my life. But a few years ago, I really started getting back into writing and wrote a novel kind of quickly, and I'm still working on editing that. When I found out about the Women's Writing Circle, I sort of came late to this anthology project, and I saw it as a way of, meeting other writers, and I was excited about the prospect of, a self-publishing project. And what came out of it was a bit of a surprise to me, because I'd been thinking about a memoir, and I had some ideas for some memoir chapters, and I thought, well, this would be a good start to get a chapter written for the memoir. And what my memoir is about is being a childless woman, and being in a society that expects every woman to have children, and if you don't, you're sort of on the outskirts and a little bit not normal. And those are the feelings that I had taken sort of into myself, whether people were trying to convey that or not. Those were the feelings that I had about that. And it's sort of a story that festered in me for years. And finding the Women's Writing Circle and finally sharing the story was like lancing a boil. But what really brought the healing balm was sharing it, and putting it out there in the world, and realizing that I'm not alone, that there are a lot of people like me, and found it was a lot of people could connect with the story. So I'm going to read some short excerpts from the story, The Legacy of a Childless Woman. It was Grandma Capaldo's 103rd birthday party. As the family began to fill up the tiny Italian restaurant for the annual event, I studied a beautiful painting of the family tree, a gift from one of her grandchildren. The trunk stood thick and strong, shooting up into 7 main branches. Each bough held the names of her children. Then their children and grandchildren branched out from there. My father-in-law's branch yielded 2 offshoots. One continued into 2 more. Then there was ours. riches in mind. It just stopped, chopped off, ended, finito. I turned away and sat in the back of the room. Seeing that visual depiction of the end of us, my husband and me, was like witnessing my own death. What will I leave to the world? With the party swirling around me, I poured myself wine and let my mind drift back over the past 15 years. Sitting in the loft, amidst the stroller, the high chair, and the other baby paraphernalia, I sobbed until I couldn't breathe. It was time to let go. It would never happen. Not to me, not to us. I felt like less of a woman, but I didn't want Rich to feel like less of a man. He rarely heard me as I cried silently beside him while he slept. It's not really his fault he didn't know the depths of my devastation. I bottled it all up inside. I shut it down. And as we've talked a lot about finding our voices tonight, and that's one of the main things that writing this story did for me, is to be able to find my voice about this subject and to share it, and to carry that on to other subjects and other aspects of writing. And I think my time's up.
Thank you so much, Patty. It was wonderful. Finally, we have Etta Patassi, who comes to us from Downingtown. And Etta is a journalist, has written for a number of suburban publications. And even so, I consider her a bit of a pro, but she tells us that she has a bit of a love-hate relationship with writing. But Etta's going to share a little bit with us tonight from an aging Rolling Stones record.
Thank you, Ginger, and thanks to everybody for coming tonight. I'd just like to suggest that for somebody like me, music has been part of my life for a long time. I grew up in South Philadelphia, and from the age of 5, the Texaco Saturday afternoon radio show was always on in our house. So opera was a big part of my life. Growing up, songs were a big part of all of our lives if we were part of the 60s and 70s. A little bit of those songs are mentioned in a short story that's in the anthology called The Zen Art of Peeling Potatoes. But I was reading about the upcoming Steel Wheelchairs tour that the Rolling Stones were going to be wreaking on us a year ago. And we were in the throes of drafting what we were going to write about in the anthology. So I took a chance, and these are some of my favorites. An aging Rolling Stones riff. 'Twould be emotional rescue if you could start me up, since waiting on a friend brings no satisfaction. And we miss you, brown sugar and wild horses. Don't paint it black, dear Ruby Tuesday. I'm just a honky-tonk woman who is slipping away, who won't get off her cloud, who can't tattoo you, who is told she's so cold. No, once she was hot. We've all learned you can't always get what you want. Angie, my dear Angie, she knew that, going on to have her 19th nervous breakdown. She ain't too proud to beg, and she was no beast of burden or backstreet girl. She had no heart of stone. But oh, she cried, what a drag it is getting old. Now, I have a cousin, Angie, who died a month after I wrote this. She was 99. She never had a nervous breakdown. She was wonderful until Alzheimer's took over. So that had a little bit to do with why I picked that one, and it fit in, and that's that. As far as writing is concerned, it's a refuge as much as it is a risk to be engaged. It helps me make a little bit of sense out of life, and I use that from what I read of John Cheever's work, who is one of my favorites. It's a lifeline. to human experience. And joining the Women's Writing Circle has been a real lifeline. It's always been important to me to be able to connect with the human race. And when I read Keith Richards' book, Life, I write book reviews for a seniors newspaper. It was another reason why the Rolling Stones were going through my head at the time. So I wish I was as organized as some of the people up here, which I'm not, but I have 2 or 3 books at home that are full of new ideas.
Very good.
Thank you so much, Anna. And I should also add that our anthology, of course, was a group project. Not only did we write and contribute, but Edda was on the, we had a group of people from the circle, committee members, who helped Susan to put the anthology together and who worked really, really hard. And I just want to acknowledge that Edda was on that committee too. I meant to put that in your introduction. Well, as you can see, a lot of ground has been covered, and this is only half of us. So if you choose to take home a copy of our anthology, one of the things that I love about it is the variety of voices and subject matter and sensitivities. And we wanted to tell you a little bit this evening about how that project came together, because of course every author's dream is to be published. And we're pretty excited. But again, since we don't have Random House behind us, we've got to go out on the road and take the show out on the road and find our readers in a different way. So Susan's going to talk a little bit about what it's like to go down the road of self-publishing.
Oh, okay, thank you. Well, do you have about 2 hours? Road of self-publishing. I have been a journalist most of my life. I was at the Philadelphia Inquirer for 17 years, so when I started writing my memoir, I really felt that I wanted to get on with it, and I didn't feel I needed the validation of what I call the guardians of the literary establishment. And a lot of exciting things were happening out there, and I did query a couple people, and the answer was, well, who wants really a story about, being widowed, and then some of the men you write about can actually be libelous, so they wouldn't take a risk on me. These were independent presses. So I began doing my research like the good journalist I was, and I found a company called Create Space, and this was in 2010. And they are the self-publishing arm of Amazon. So when the Women's Writing Circle, and I began hearing some of these stories in the circle, and I realized how much value there was in these stories, and I know you've heard that tonight too. I had gone through self-publishing with Create Space for my memoirs, and it occurred to me that we could do it with this project. And, frankly, it was a real collaborative process. The women, all these stories in the book are originals. These were never published anywhere before, and we came together in 2 separate critique sessions over the summer, and they had deadlines they had to meet. So they were critiquing their work, each other. The committee of 4 of us critiqued work, and then we wrapped it up and got it ready for an outside editor that we hired up in Long Island, New York, and she gave it the final edit, at which point we got the manuscript ready to go to Create Space. We also at that time hired our own cover illustrator, a woman from Downingtown by the name of Jane Schock, who did our beautiful cover based on our title, which we came up with from an Emily Dickinson quote, Slants of Light. So Jane did the cover. We met for a group photograph and put that on the back. We wrote all the copy on the back. We came up with the title. We designed all the interior formatting for the book, the running heads, the fonts. We worked with Create Space on that. So what I like about self-publishing, and I hope the women do too, is that we had total creative control over this project. We set all our own pricing. We've put it up on Kindle. We have it up as a trade paperback. We can change the pricing anytime we want. And, I think we did an extremely professional job. They were not guaranteed their stories in the book. they were guaranteed a story in the book if they worked hard and met the editing and the criteria we had outlined. We wrote a contract that every woman had to sign, including that she would be actively involved in marketing this, because you know, this is part of being a self-published author. We don't have publicists. We're on our own with this. And there are millions of books out there on Amazon, and so in order not to get lost in the sea of new titles, we are very much, as you can see, committed to taking our stories out to the public, sharing women's voices, celebrating our stories, and hopefully offering to you a very unique and different approach to writing, and a product that was lovingly crafted by our women writers. So that pretty much sums it up. Did I miss anything about the self-publishing?
Self-publishing 101.
Self-publishing 101.
Thumbnails, guys.
Just that fast, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Susan. Well, that concludes the formal part of our program, but what we would really like to do is to invite you, and it's especially nice since we're a relatively small group, to linger with us, to talk with us. We've, of course, brought copies of our book for you to buy if you would like to, but mostly we'd like to meet you and hear what you think, and certainly get your feedback. We'd also like to thank Phoenixville Library and Mark Pinto here for hosting us.
Yes. I want to
Well, do you want me
who
to
is
get
the
this on?
youngest and who is the oldest person in the group?
Oh,
Age-wise.
that's an excellent question. We actually have 15 writers in the anthology. Obviously, not all are here tonight.
Right.
And the youngest one is in her late 20s and up to about 70.
I'm the oldest.
And I was impressed with their education. Could we go down the line and tell me what they are again? You know, the school
Our formal
teacher, this,
education?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I was very impressed with it.
You first, Ginger?
Oh,
Yeah.
I am, well, my background is really in education. I was originally an English teacher. I have my master's in
See
education.
what I mean?
Yeah.
And she won't. She also has
Yes.
an entry in the book.
Yes, she does. Oh, and I have 2 stories in the book, too. Yeah, I'm a fellow grad with Ginger Education, University of Pennsylvania.
I went to the University of Delaware and studied English, and I got my master's in reading education.
I graduated from Westchester University with American Literature and Creative Writing.
I graduated from Penn State in psychology, and then I went on and got a master's in history at Villanova, and I have a reading specialist certification K through 12 from Cabrini.
I am a retired school bus driver.
A lot of good stories here.
I received my bachelor in journalism and history at Indiana University, and I also have a teacher certification in secondary social studies.
And I graduated Cabrini College 1,000 years ago with a degree in English and Communications. In between that, it was the School of Hard Knocks, about 6 or 7 jobs and 20 years with IBM.
Yeah.
Is that still on?
So is this one. You can edit that out if you like.
It's been very quiet back there.
That because we had to concentrate.
Cindy, what's your story about? Or called, or
Well, thank you.
in a nutshell?
Thank you for that. My story is called Live Your Dream, and like a lot of folks here, it came out of my own experience of losing a job. And so I was exploring, as somebody talked about here, that. But it's also, as much as it's about the devastation of losing a job, I wanted it also to be, it takes place in a conversation between 2 friends. And like a lot of difficult experiences in life, your friends get you through, right? So the character in the book that the protagonist is talking to is kind of an amalgam, a combination of all the people, and a tribute to friendship. So that's what my story is about. Thank you.
Sure. I'm also wanting to ask you, I'm intrigued about your story. It seems like a powerful story because, as you said, I have a friend who also doesn't have children, and I've never talked to her about that, but it just is, it's huge in this culture and in life.
Mm-hmm.
So is your novel, is it a short story or is it a novel that you're writing about this experience in your life?
That story, that's the piece of memoir that's in the anthology.
Okay.
So that's, what's my novel about?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, my
Is that
question is,
thing?
Yeah,
does
it's the same
do you
thing.
find that this theme of your experience in life runs through a lot of your writing?
In some ways, there is the experience of loss and
Mhm.
grief
Mhm.
that I touch on and not touch on, but
Mhm.
that the novel is about.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's pervasive just through everything because it's never ending. It's just always there.
It's always there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking it's probably.
But there are positive aspects of that too, which,
Sure.
you know, I didn't get a chance to go into, but.
Sure. It could also be kind of funny, maybe, because
Yeah.
every tragedy has its.
Yeah. Cats are a lot cheaper.
Well, I don't know about
And they get hungry. Any other questions?
How long do you meet for, and like, what is sort of like one of your sessions like?
Oh, very good. We meet twice a month for Read Around the second Saturday of the month at Wellington Square. We meet for 2.5 hours from 9 to 11:30. And then we meet for Critique the last Saturday of the month from 9 to 11:30. And the sessions are totally different in that the Read Around is more of a test driving your voice, reading work in a more informal, supportive, validating experience in the circle. And then the Critique is for a work in progress. And work is submitted in advance, and we read it and then come together and critique it. So, we try really in the circle to emphasize writing. What makes for good writing, writing techniques, and this is something that we work on, our craft. And coming together as a group of writers with different styles and voices and a lot of sharing, it's really very, very instructional to have people reading their work and getting instant feedback from readers and other writers. So it's a great way to hone your craft. And we welcome women to the read-arounds. Right now, the read-arounds are closed only to women. I contemplated opening it to men, but at this time, we're keeping it just to women. And but the workshops are open to men. And we run 2 workshops a year. This one on October 19th is a memoir writing workshop. And we've had workshops in fiction, journaling, and another memoir workshop, actually. So we try to really give instruction in the craft of writing as well.
I just wanted to add one thing. We all are trying very hard to put our voices out there without apology. It's really hard. At first we're like, oh, this should be, you know, I'm sorry it's not a little bit better or longer, I should have edited it more, but we're just trying to put our voices out there and let them be. So we're still learning that.
Yeah, and I should say that my story in the anthology is about a woman in her mid-50s going through internet dating. And the other one is about a woman who actually loses her husband at a very young age. So there's a lot of issues in there with women finding their voices through writing and feeling very empowered once the stories are written, with always the attention, though, to professionalism and good writing.
Can you tell them the bargain price?
Bargain price? You mean how much is the anthology? Yeah, you can get a copy for $10.
And we'd be happy to sign.
Yeah, we'll be happy to sign
Yep.
them to it, yes.
And the other thing that's nice is that the stories are, you know, the book you can see is pretty small, so you can take it with you. It's great when you're waiting for a doctor's office. Seriously, they're quick. They're quick reads, but they're very powerful. But anyway.
I have a comment, a question and a comment. Would you suggest that writing circle is just great for anyone that just loves to write? I mean, I have a story. We all have a story, and I can find a lot of my story with all of you up there in the panel.
Yes.
From being 18 married and 26 a widow, abused 8 years, and remarried, met my husband on the internet, and just things in your head.
Right.
And I took note of you said it being healing, and I think that's what I really need. And I still journal and stuff, and I find it hard to talk. I'm surprised I haven't stuttered yet. I'm really nervous because I really don't like to talk, but I have a lot of things in my head, and I write it out. And I worked in publishing. I've proofread, and I'm from New York. Did I mention I'm from New York? But I live in Phoenixville. Quite a transition.
It's a better town here than New York.
This is quite unusual for me, but I'm loving Phoenixville. But back to the question in hand. Would you suggest that a writing circle would be good for a person such as myself? Because I need an outlet. I came here tonight as an outlet because my husband, he's getting at me saying I don't do anything. I get depressed. I mope around. I have no friends yet after 2 years. And it's hard because I believe friends come in a season. I just turned 50, and it's just like this is another life experience I'm going through. It's night sweats at night, and it's really cold in the closet. What's going on? It's anxiety. What's going on with me? And I have no one to talk and tell this to. So.
There you go.
Yeah, you should join us.
You should. And she should have a workshop.
You would fit right in.
I'm sweating now.
Yeah, and one of the things why I formed the Women's Writing Circle was writing is a very isolating endeavor. And that camaraderie, those kindred spirits of coming together and forming a community of writers is just so invaluable. So yeah, I hear you. It's really important not to be isolated when you're writing.
You're funny too.
Yeah. You might want to check out the workshop.
Yeah.
And there are flyers out on the table.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Or at least maybe invest in the book, see what the stories and poems are like, and yours is right in there.
I read poetry.
right.
I remember I was emptying out my grandmother's home that she had passed, and I had all these writings of Naomi Charles and poems that I did, and of course I didn't keep it because I was so stressed of just emptying an apartment that I lived in all my childhood life, and and I had to do it alone. So and I regret that, but you can't live in regrets, right?
Yeah.
It's all in there.
Yeah.
Just writing about the switch from New York to Phoenix.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
that's
a
the story right there.
Yeah, and I should say that all genres are welcome to the circle. You don't have to be published. So published, unpublished, we welcome you. And, any other questions?
Yeah, I know. I just heard the air come on. Thank you all for coming out tonight. It means so much to be supported. And if you have any ideas for us about where we might reach more readers, we'd love to hear about that too as a publicist. So thank you.
Isn't this being televised for?
Yeah, this is, I understand, from the library staff. And I would like to acknowledge, actually, this session has been audio taped. Mark Pinto and John, who is a library volunteer back there. And my understanding, Mark, is that it will be going up on the library website.
On the library website, yes.
So we would love, we're really excited. You can see why we're nervous, okay? But the cool thing about that, of course, is that it means it can be shared. So you can, go back and listen to it again, but also we'd love for you to share it. And
Do we get a chance to edit it?
No. How many times did I say on? All right,
Thank you.
Thank you for
Very,
your
very
ideas.
much.